Thank you all for attending today. I know it's going to be an interesting session. Jonathan and I have known each other for well over a decade now. He started out in Mack when I was there, and we knew right away he was going to be there long because he had a lot of skills and a lot of ambition, and quickly went on to become the manager of marketing there at DED for a long time, and has more recently turned to project management, where he's a senior project manager there at DED. And he'll cover some of the things that are in DED. Some of you know the programs well there, but there's always turnover of staff, there's new people. And I think it's a good time to just get reacquainted with what DED's doing. They've done a lot of different things in the last few years. Jonathan knows that history. He's grown up with the department over many years. And we're just excited to have him here today to talk about those programs and to help share that information, just have a dialogue back and forth about what's going on there and how you can interact and share information, because we're all in this mission together to help improve our economy, improve our communities. And so I think a really important player in that is the Department of Economic Development and tools that they have and people. So with that, Jonathan, take it away, and so glad you're here.
I appreciate it. So firstly, I just have to know, can anyone hear the chainsaws or heavy equipment in my backyard? Okay, good, because I've never had chainsaws in my backyard while I've had to do one of these, and we're having landscaping done, and apparently they decided to get out the chainsaws at this point. So if it gets loud, please let me know, and I will yell out my window and ask them to slow down for a moment. So I don't really need to get into any more. Alan, appreciate the introduction, and thanks for everyone for joining. I will jump into here. I have a timer on my desk so that I don't go long, because Alan did not say, but I tend to be long-winded. I see Jen is on there as well, and she could also attest to that. But we'll get this started. I want to get the right screen here. I may have to switch. I don't know which one is which. Let's see if this is the right one. All right, so we're going to start off with a poll. I'm gonna pull that up. Now, I think there's 2 poll questions on there. We'll just go with the first poll question, and then we'll come back and revisit the poll when we get to the end of the presentation for the second one. So
be showing up, yeah. So just that first question.
Okay. So yeah, again, many of you have probably worked with the DED. Some of you have not, so that's why we're just going to jump in there. But just wanted to, ask a question like, do you guys fully understand the purpose of the Department of Economic Development? Simple yes or no, and we'll just go from there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, looks like it closed already. I don't know if Jonathan did, but oh, relax. So open back up again. We had about 7 people who voted on that first question that said they understand the purpose of DED. Now it's showing a little less.
Yeah, that polling closing was my fault. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, right? And there's multiple co-hosts. All right, well, we got 8 people. Okay. Well, on this one. So looking at that first one, Jonathan, I hope you can see it. So some people, yes, fully understand the purpose of it. But then we have about 25% that say no, they do not understand the purpose of the Department of Economic Development.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to hear that a lot of people do. I'll admit, some days I wonder if I understand the purpose, but that's just the nature of the organization. So we'll jump into it, and I'll jump onto the next slide and sort of just go into what we sort of consider like our focus and mission statement. I'll just read it out loud. I know everyone can read, but the Missouri Department of Economic Development works to create an environment that encourages economic growth by supporting Missouri businesses, diverse industries, strengthening our communities, developing a talented, skilled workforce, and ultimately focusing our united efforts to help Missourians across the state prosper. The last component of that is something that our department's been striving to do more and more, so especially through the recent transformation that we had. So as many of you may know, about 2.5 years ago, the department shifted and divested some entities. It affected, of course, the Department of Higher Education and Department of Insurance and others who took on some of the entities that were part of us. And through those efforts, we sort of evolved some of our divisions and our focuses on what we do every day. So I want to just jump into The department divisions, I'm going to try to run through these really quick since the majority of you are very familiar with the department. So I won't get into them in too much of great detail because there are plenty that are very similar to they have been for a number of years. There are some that are new or have sort of shifted efforts and focuses. So the first one is the Regional Engagement Division I want to get into. That's the division I'm a part of. And this is actually one of the new divisions that was created whenever the department transitioned and transformed, so to speak. And people like to, people don't like to use the word reorganize, so I'll call it a transformation. But with that, this is where the project managers in the department ended up. Before, and at the time when this happened, we had about 3 project managers for the entire state. And as you can imagine, 3 project managers trying to work project across the state was a little bit lean. So we built this out. And one of the biggest changes is what our efforts are, not just peddling programs, as I like to say, but actually getting there and, as the name is, engaging with the communities, which is similar to, like, I think what a lot of you guys do in some regards, but primarily focused directly on our specific state programs and how they work. And then, of course, connecting with partners such as yourselves. Our primary contact, of course, so usually we're the ones that are going to be reaching out or being reached out to by businesses and community partners and other partners across the state. We work on business retention and expansion projects, as well as community development projects. And we sort of manage those from like the start to the finish. And then, of course, we work closely with internal people, because I will be the first to admit, I do not know the programs in and outs like our program specialists do that actually minister and facilitate those. And so we pull those in quite often, so that, I'm making sure that I'm guiding the projects forward correctly and giving the right information to those that need it. Next up is Missouri OneStart. So this was a part of the Division of Workforce Development, in a sense. They are the arm that did the recruitment, pre-employment screening, and the training, and we absorbed them into it. So there's about, I think, 6 or 7 members of that team, and they do the customized training program. So they work with the community colleges and work on developing training programs for companies that are expanding or relocating to Missouri and are needing a skilled workforce there in place that's built out specifically to the needs of their business. They also work with like pre-employment, so they help in those regards. And then they also, in regards to, I'm going sort of backwards, but the recruitment component is they'll help build like websites, use different tools and assets to help bring people into the jobs. As many of you know, one of the biggest challenges still, even through COVID, is still currently the need for a skilled workforce, or just a workforce period. And so, of course, that's where they step in and work with us and others around the state to help make that happen. The next division is Business and Community Solutions. It used to be Business and Community Services. It was actually the division that Mack was a part of before it was divested. They are like the administrative arm of all the programs, the tax issuances, and then, of course, handle all the reporting and those kind of things. They also work with, like, again, I mentioned earlier, regional engagement closely as we move forward, working with customers to help them get what they need. And then they're composed of a lot of different entities, though. So you have the business finance team, the redevelopment team. We have the international investment team, which those that aren't familiar actually have offices, I think 12 or 13 offices around the world, whereas they work with different companies that are interested in, importing the goods. So they also do trade missions. So they take companies here in Missouri and take them to different industry-focused trade shows around the world to sort of get them in there and get their products into new emerging markets around the world. It's a pretty cool unit. I'll just touch on it a little bit. And then, of course, the Community Development Block Grant team. And I'll get into that a little bit later, because they're actually one of the programs that I'm going to touch on. And then I'm going to close it off with AmeriCorps and Community Service Commission. Community Service Commission is actually the team itself, but they work closely with AmeriCorps and facilitate a lot of the operations of AmeriCorps teams and groups around the state. Sort of like a centralized place for AmeriCorps here in Missouri. Next up is strategy and performance. So this is also a new team, one that I'm really glad to know that we have. This division focuses on like strategic planning and like data analysis. So Jeff Pinkerton is the research director there, and he heads up the research activities for that unit. I'm sure that some of you have worked with him in the past, and he does a great job there, and has a couple of researchers that work alongside him to help do various research, fulfill various research needs, as well as like the RIMI and that kind of stuff, right, Alan? You're a little familiar with that. And of course, they also provide a strategic direction and performance evaluation. So they do external research and focuses, as well as like internal performance evaluations. Something that for a long time, DED didn't necessarily have in place. We had our reports that we would send up to the legislature, of course, but we didn't have any entity internally that focused a lot of its efforts on making sure that when we were doing certain things with our programs and with our activities, they were meeting the mark, so to speak, and that's what their unit is doing there. It's also part of like the legislative aspect, so the legislative representative office, as well as like the communications team and our military advocates office, headed by Joe Driscoll, who's the previous department director. He's also part of strategy and performance. And again, just specialized areas. So they jump in and sort of get pulled into any project where we don't have any information on it necessarily. They come in and help provide and find that information for us. Of course, Division of Tourism, they have not changed. They're operating just as they have in the past. They promote Missouri to travelers. They work with DMOs or designated marketing organizations for tourism activities and things like that. They have a marketing like in co-op program for those DMOs to help them offset the cost of promoting their area and their activities and tourism activities there. And they're somewhat unique because they're independently governed by the Tourism Commission. And I believe that works closely with the Lieutenant Governor's office as well. And then we have Missouri Housing Development Commission. They're actually based out of Kansas City, some of you probably know. They work with financing and construction of affordable housing. They help with home loans, first-time buyers and that kind of stuff. And they're also independently governed. We don't work that closely with them on a day-to-day operations, but that is hopefully something that will be changing in the future because, as we all know, there's housing shortages and struggles across the country and across the state, and they are definitely helping to try to drive that forward and make changes in that area. So that is the gist of the department. So I know many of you know a lot of that information, but I did want to just touch on that at the beginning. So we'll just jump right into like the programs, which is why some of you are probably here. So I want to look at an approach of like goals at first. Probably many of the goals that you guys share as well, but they're designed to align overarching focus of the mission at hand, like I mentioned earlier for the department. And we sort of have grouped them together into different categories, but yet they can work independently. Sometimes our programs do just apply to a specific project. And then in many cases, 2 or 3 programs will be, interlocked to sort of help the community or the business the best as possible. So, the focus is, supporting existing businesses, of course, a big part of it. And then assisting communities in regards to capacity challenges, which could mean a lot of different things, whether infrastructure or in regards to workforce and those kind of challenges. And then planning resources to target redevelopment activities. A lot of the redevelopment activities have been in the metros, like in the St. Louis area. You see a lot of that, as well as like Kansas City. We're definitely working to try to expand that as best we can to help the many rural communities across the state. Okay, so we'll jump into the first program here. We have Missouri Works. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but those that aren't, it's we call it a premier business growth tool. Ultimately, it was a combination of, I believe, 3 or 4 programs that existed about 9 years ago. We sort of plugged them all together, so it was a little bit easier for those that would be applying for benefits through the state in regards to like expansion projects and stuff like that, to be able to apply through one centralized program. It's a little bit easier than having to have 3 different ones where they're having to like apply for them and then report on and etc. It's not to say that there's not plenty of reporting annually that they have to do after they're in the program, but it is a little bit more streamlined when they built in and built out Missouri Works. So it's an incentive tool for attraction, expansion, and retention. I asterisked attraction because our department doesn't work attraction projects. We may partner with them, but Missouri Partnership, which is a public slash like private entity here in Missouri, focuses on attraction. They actually work on projects that come into the state that don't, with companies that don't have a footprint here, as well as go to, well, prior to COVID, would go to trade shows and sort of promote and market Missouri to those in other states and other areas and other industries around the country and even sometimes around the world. And so that's what they do. But in regards to expansion retention, that's our wheelhouse, and that's how this program plugs in. It helps them businesses with access to capital through withholdings and tax credits. So it is a program where like they will not receive the benefits on the front end, but once they create a set number of jobs, the withholdings taxes they typically pay into the state, they get to retain for 5 to 6 years, depending on how long they've been here in Missouri. And then as well as there is a tax credit component, which is discretionary, depends on the size and scope of the project. We also have an annual cap like a lot of different programs. So there's only so much money in the pot per year for that. And so the tax credits are reserved for larger projects, and they also are going to be projects that are competitive in nature. So you're not going to have a company that already is here in Missouri and is planning to expand and isn't looking to go anywhere typically get a piece of, or component of the tax credits. It's usually whenever we're looking at, like I have a project right now and they're looking at Missouri and Indiana and Texas. And so that's whenever discretionary and tax credits may be pulled into that. And I hear the chainsaw, so hopefully if you guys hear that, it is because I have a tree getting cut down right now. And then also there's job creation and capital investment that's required. So there's a minimum of 2 jobs and a minimum of $100,000 of capital investment. I will say oftentimes the job creation is much larger in scale, and there's much more money invested than 100,000 typically. And then it's performance-based. So in order for them to receive these benefits, they must meet what they put in their application and required. So if they said that they're going to be creating 115 jobs and making a capital investment of, let's say, $20 million, then that would need to be met in order for them to garner the benefits of the program. Next up, we have a neighborhood assistance program, or NAP. So this program is focused on community and neighborhood projects that are assisting at-risk populations. It's designed, there's a training job component that was recently pulled into this program to help people get, of course, trained that are in that population. It's for crime prevention, opioid abuse, and challenges there, community service projects and revitalization, and then community-based buildings and so forth. So like community centers and those kind of things. So the way this program works is a entity or nonprofit will get established, and let's say we'll be wanting to build a building for a new community center that's going to help children in that risk population or people in that risk population. They'll open that up, and through they'll receive donations from taxpayers around the state, and they'll have a set allotted amount in these tax credits that will then in turn be like returned to the taxpayer. So that someone donates $10,000 to this entity, they would get a tax credit back for $5,000 or $70,000, depending on the type of tax credits. You have $250,000 max, and there's like for the 50% tax credits, and we also have the 70% tax credits. There's the 70% tax credit component. The projects are really competitive, but the 250 go pretty quick as well. Usually we have about twice as many applicants as we have approved, and there's application cycles that work with that. Next up, we have Youth Opportunities Program. It melds very well with NAP in a lot of ways. They work in conjunction with each other with some minor changes. One, of course, is that it's the projects that are going to fit into this program and are going to be eligible are going to be focused on youth in particular, whereas NAP could be something that's broader scope and outside of just youth, of course, like the jobs training component of it. This one is at-risk youth. And as you can see here, I put out some of the eligible criteria and some of the different activities that are taking place. So it's for violence prevention, youth activity centers, like counseling, adopt a school is some of the ways that this one's used. And the caps or the limits are a little bit different, a little bit leaner. It's like 200,000 limited annually on those. and 200,000 is the largest tax credit that an individual donor could receive on that one. Next up, we have the Community Development Block Grant. So this program is actually funded through HUD itself, and the funds are allocated to the state for us to disperse them on projects. So they need to lean in forward to our overall mission, like I mentioned earlier, like most of our projects should and do. With this one, it can be used a lot of like infrastructure. There's a lot of different applications for this program. As you can see there, like we have the newest one is the CDBG CV, or it's like a code response. And we're still, from my understanding, sort of building out the last components of what all is going to fit into that. But ultimately, it's people can apply, it can be applied for in regards to like code response needs. Of course, and then we run into the ones that we always have had in place, and many of you are probably familiar with, which is the general infrastructure capacity, the industrial infrastructure component like wastewater, disaster recovery, resilience is a part of that as well. Long-term recovery, even community facilities. I did asterisk loan programs because just like the action loan program that also goes through CDBG, but it hasn't been utilized for some time simply because money is so cheap, so to speak, like interest rates are so low that it'd be better just financed through a private lending entity than to use this program. So it's not really used that much, but I did want to list it, of course. And then there's approximately $24 million in this program annually, at least for 2021. That number does move up and down, and sometimes they are infused with large sums of money if there's some sort of a disaster. So when the flood hit the state, they received, I can't remember how many millions to help assist those that were impacted by that flood. This one, there was one, I did want to mention something, but I forgot my train of thought, I'm sorry. But there was another thing I wanted to mention that, but I'm sure it'll come back to me later. In this program, like if you are out in communities and someone's interested in has reached out to you, one thing to take into consideration, since it is funded through HUD and the funds are federal, there are a lot of requirements in place, and this program typically takes a lot longer. I have a lot of projects who'd be interested in using like the industrial infrastructure component, let's say, because they need water ran to their facility. If they're going to be moving pretty fast, which a lot of the projects are 3 to 6 months out, it may not fit because there is environmental requirements and things that they have to do and reviews, and it can just be can take quite some time. So if the project's closer than a year out, then it's one of those ones that I usually err on the side of caution in regards to like saying that yes, this is something you could definitely utilize because it does have a long window, but it could be really beneficial. Another thing is, the program doesn't actually benefits don't go directly to the company. And I just watched a tree fall down. This is very weird to do a presentation and have trees falling down in my backyard, but that's just what happened. It was supposed to. Anyway, sorry, lost my train of thought on that one too. But yeah, so like the public entity will be the one that will actually apply for it. So the county or the city will be the one that's going to actually be applying for the program in a sense as it moves forward, because they're the ones that are going to be getting the actual the benefit indirectly, because this can't fit on the private property itself. In other words, if a company was to need water ran to their facility, they could get that water ran to it up until their private property, and then at which point in time they would have to, of course, pay for that cost. But at least you could get water from the city or the county to their property. Then we have Brownfield. Now, I don't work on this redevelopment program that often, but ultimately it's a financing program for like commercial industrial sites that have hazmat or really heavily dilapidated structures that have not been underutilized for like up to at least like 3 years. So a good example would be a company wants to invest in a large property that used to work with asbestos per se or something like that, or they had something in there that needed to be mitigated. This program can help go in and help clean up that area so that it is deemed like safe and healthy to operate out of and have people in. There's a lot of caveats with it, as you can imagine. The EPA, of course, DNR has a voluntary cleanup program, which they have to enroll in, make sure everything's like good to go there. And this tax credit can pay up to like 100% of the costs that are mediating the structure or that area. And there's also, of course, in many of the programs requirements. So you need to have at least 10 jobs going to be created, or maybe need to retain 25 jobs from a company. Okay, the chainsaw stuff, so that's good. The Historic Tax Credit Program, or what we like to call HTC, is another one of our programs. This one is used quite often in your metropolitan areas as well. In St. Louis downtown, it's been used extensively on large, like old manufacturing buildings downtown that have been converted into lofts, and then retail establishments at the bottom, or businesses of some sort in the bottom. Now this one works is there are state tax credits that will help offset the cost of the rehab of that property. So a developer would go in and or a private citizen or a company would come in and assess, how much it's going to cost to do the work on it, how much the property is valued at, or what they acquired the property for, and then apply for this program before they've done any work on the structure itself. And then this program could help, of course, pay for those updates and renovations to it. This one has 2 cycles. It's competitive, and it is incredibly busy. I work closely with a guy that oversees this program, and he has stacks and stacks of paper this tall all over his desk for all the applications and the submissions of this one. Okay. And then the business use incentives for large scale development program, or BUILD. And I like BUILD a lot better, and I will be quite frank, I couldn't remember what the acronym stood for because no one calls it by that because it is far too long, but hey, government programs, right? But BUILD is a somewhat unique program. It's reserved for major investments and job creation expansions. Usually, the minimums here are $15 million to $10 million, depending on the type of industry. Asterisk, most projects are significantly larger because they usually are. $10 to $15 million of investment anytime you're creating 100 jobs, which is the minimum that needs to be created in 3 years in order for someone to utilize this program, or 500 jobs if they're in the office industry. $10 million isn't going to stretch very far. So usually these are much larger scale projects. So like a GM or someone like that, a Quaker Windows, when they did their large facility in Eldon, they utilized BUILD. And it's also a little bit different and unique because it's not just, they don't apply directly through a department, and we're the ones that approve this program. This one is actually through our department, as well as the Missouri Development Finance Board, or MDFB, and they actually review it and determine how that all works and fits together. And then there's bonding amounts issued, which are determined by our department in regards to how that incentive works and how that capital can help move forward for those kind of projects. So I sort of blasted through these because, again, I tend to be long-winded. So we're going to jump to a poll. Then after the poll, then we'll jump into questions. But if Hannah could pull up the poll.
Yeah, I'm going to relaunch the one we did earlier. We had some people answer, but just give everyone a chance again to answer that. And we're just looking at the second one of this. So let me relaunch it, and I'll share the results this time. I didn't do that. Okay, so it should show up. So the second question, do you believe that our 2 organizations capitalize on our shared interest?
It's not a short question.
Yeah. You can be honest. Is it yes or no?
Yeah, please be honest. I don't believe Rob Dixon or anyone's on this either, so you can say whatever you want now.
All right. Good. Oh, we just got over half of the people that just answered. Great. Good participation. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share results. So pretty positive.
Well, I think what it shows on the second one is that obviously there's more room to capitalize on our shared goals for the
Oh
state.
no! Oh, I read it wrong. It says no. I thought everyone was really positive.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, the results changed from previously. Never mind. Thank you, Al,
Well,
for reading that correctly.
I will say I think that is positive. I'm hoping like the purpose of this was just for one to familiarize everyone here again with like the department, especially after it went through its transformation a couple years back. And then also just to sort of, brief on the programs that we utilize a lot. Our department has over 30 some programs. The ones that I touched on are the ones that are primarily used the most. And they change all the time, and I'm learning more and more about them regularly. I had a call just yesterday about MDFB, and because I just wasn't quite sure, and I talked to a couple people on that one. So, or not MDFB, but build, and I was talking to MDFB and the person in our office, because there's just a lot to them. I'm sure you guys have your own programs and your own things that you facilitate, and they're constantly evolving, and their uses can look a lot of different ways. But it's one of those things that many people in our department believe, and we're trying to work more to, just as yourselves, is there's a lot of redundancy that's needed, and we could partner together and get much further if we work together more often.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, and I'm glad to see that people think that there is a lot of headroom there, because I don't work with many of the people in the extension in these centers like I should and would like to, and so we can start that stuff today. Let me jump on to the next slide. We'll jump into this questions one.
Yeah, and we have
Yeah, just
some
one-
comments
one-
coming up in the chat too, just
Yeah,
ideas of ways to partner and things.
let me see if I can expand this. I'm not seeing the questions on mine.
Oh, okay,
They're on the chat there, I think.
on the chat.
Yeah, and while you're looking at that, I do want to. You can see from Jonathan's information, there's a lot of programs out there. There's some workhorses of programs that he kind of covered, but they all have a lot of complexities. And so I see a lot of the challenge is just educating your stakeholders about what are potential projects. And that's what I love about this. This is Jonathan's able to give you some insights around, this one's really utilized a lot. This one, takes these type of requirements or this type of time frame, because a lot of times just the education side of what those resources are is really valuable to our community. So, but it's hard to be a pro at everything when you've got, dozens of programs. So it's nice to have these contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say like the project managers, like my counterparts here in the department, we're very much generalists even ourselves. We have all these programs, but we don't deep dive into these things and get into the nuts and bolts. And I'm constantly on the phone with people in business and community solutions and others that work with them and see, multitudes of these applications and projects, and have a better insight on them. But I mean, ultimately, there's, I had the map up earlier of our different regions. And so many of you, I don't know where regions everybody's in. And again, I'm sorry, I can't see the questions. So maybe
Yeah.
me later.
Well, John, if you stop sharing the screen, it might help, but it's under the chat. And I see
Okay.
there's some people that have some questions as well. So I think Maria, is your hand up to ask a question? And
Yes, I have a quick
Okay.
question.
yeah, go ahead.
So thank you, Jonathan, for that presentation. That was great. So how do you ensure that when there's a project, like a big one, like the Tesla one we had recently, and we had Joplin competing for that, and then later Kansas City entered that, and then you ended up having a state competition that ended up hurting the two, particularly Joplin. So how do you ensure the way you're helping regionally that doesn't happen again, I guess?
It's a tough challenge. It's something we have to navigate on occasion. When those big projects come in, it's very much one of those things where we sort of help try to bridge that gap, so to speak, because we represent the entire state. Because, let's say Joplin, Kansas City, that's so far away that Labor Shed, which is usually, about 60 miles, 70 miles max, is going to be lost, because there's not going to be that many people who live in Joplin that would be able to go to Kansas City and vice versa. And then, of course, all the other indirect jobs that come from a project like that. So we just do our best to try to bridge those and connect those so that we can all see the win in those projects. But there really is no easy or right answer in those, especially because each project like that is pretty unique. Working with, with large entities like yourselves who also have regional focused partners and groups like that, that's whenever it all comes together, and we do try to work with, anyone and everyone that has a state footprint, so that we can sort of keep keep those things from cannibalizing themselves, I guess, so to speak. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I got.
Thanks. So one of the comments was kind of just a question about partnerships between DED and Mizzou, but just more of a, it's possible that current confidentiality agreements we're under, maybe we can harmonize those so we can each work together more and share details between organizations. I don't really know if that's a question for you or others to answer, but that was just one idea of, you know, maybe there's a better way to partner and share information. So this is a question about the COVID bill and the CDBG. So with many small communities getting money from the latest COVID bill, can they partner with the CDBG funds to do a project such as like a larger sewer project, that type of thing?
So it's my understanding that it depends. So if it was the first round, because they've reissued it, like if it was from last year, I believe then they could apply for the COVID funds. But if they are receiving some type of funds that were extended through this year, I don't believe that they can cross, because it's almost like double dipping. But again, last time I spoke to the manager of that unit, they were still sort of working out the details. And I mean, I didn't touch on it, but as we know, there's a lot of money potentially coming down the pipeline from the feds, from the act that's getting ready to be, you know, approved. And we don't know what that really looks like. We have some ideas. We know that infrastructure is going to be a big component of that. COVID response is going to be a big component of that. Broadband, which is, of course, infrastructure is a part of that. But we don't know what that's going to look like and how we'll be able to apply it. And unfortunately, a lot of the COVID relief funding is sort of like that. This was something that many of you that have been working in economic development around this for a long time, we've never seen anything like this before in our careers. I talked to economic developers that have been doing it for 30 some years, and they're just like, I have never seen something and it impacts like this. And it was very unique in nature. Short, it hit real hard, and then it sort of eased up. I can tell you that our department's had more business activity in the last few months than it had for the last year. And so with that, the program rolled out, and they're still trying to figure out like the details. But I think that if they're getting benefits, or if they're working through it for this year, they can't use CDBG. But I'd be happy to get the answer and see what details they've hammered out since last time I talked to the manager of CDBG.
Thanks. And then there was just another question asking anyone in our group if they have currently using any DED programs, such as the youth or the neighborhood assistance program. And they mentioned they know they partner with some AmeriCorps groups. And one of our engagement specialists do use the neighborhood assistance program. So I guess kind of to build on to that, if anyone wants to share any stories of partnership extension that you've, extension faculty, if you've done that, that would be great. Or Jonathan, if you have any other ideas of, what are good ways for extension to partner with DED, like where in that process should we be reaching out, or what does that look like if we want to partner together more?
I'll hold for anyone's response, or whether they used it. Looks like, okay, yeah. So in regards to us, and this is something that I was going to mention later on, and why I asked the question in the poll on how we partnered. I think that one of the things that we need to do better, and of course, like that everyone here on the call can do better, do more, so is to reach out whenever projects do come of awareness, or something comes up that seems like it may be a fit, and just reach out to myself, the regional engagement team, which I'd be happy to send a link out later. We have, I think, 15 people across the state. I had a last slide. I had one more slide that had contact information for myself and for Michelle Hadaway, who also works here in the Central region, although she's been promoted as the deputy director. So sort of stuck with me for the most part. And then we also have another individual in the Central region of the state who she splits it and helps out. Her name's Krisha Atchison. But whenever, I would just like to, say that whenever you guys have the opportunity to work with a community company about something, and you think that one of the programs I mentioned could work, or wanting to know if there are any programs, feel free to engage with us, just like we engage with you. I'm not familiar with your group's programs that well either. I think something that would be great is having another joint meeting. I mean, we can do it through Zoom like this. Our division, I'm sure, would be happy to at a later date schedule something and have members of the extension and you guys here and your engagement specialists like connect with our regional engagement, sort of just do like introductions, sort of like I did now, but again, just from your standpoint and reconnect and convene, because that's how that's how we're going to partner. I mean, I'm sure that you guys talk about working with your partners. We talk about working with our partners, but then at least for us, unless there's a project that a partner's brought us into, we don't really partner sometimes unless we're, are thinking about it out of the box. But I mean, in regards to NAP and YLP, I really think that those two programs in particular would be things that would really be in you guys' wheelhouse and could really be applicable to what you guys are doing in your communities. And again, those are great programs, really competitive, but like the more applications, the better though. It's yes, it means less people maybe will receive them, but there could be some really great organizations out there that we don't know about that they don't know they could apply for this, that could really, expand their reach and what they could do and impact. So
I appreciate
Amber
it.
or Richard? Oh,
Go
I was just
ahead,
saying,
Anna.
Amber and Richard both mentioned the various projects they've worked on in their area. So would either of you be willing to unmute yourself and share a bit about your experience and what that looks like in your area?
great.
So I can speak on, the NAP project, and we have a local organization that uses that, and they use it as a internship program for high school students that are juniors and seniors. And so we take advantage of that and partner with them, which I partner with that organization on a lot of our programs that we do, because they do have a ready audience there for the most part. But they actually work with local businesses and place the teens in local businesses to do internships. And so we take some of those internships in our office and we work with them in nutrition. We've had them do graphic design and help manage social media, things like that. And they've also done some office assistant work to kind of help with just learning office assistant and customer service, things like that. So we really enjoyed it.
So you said there was an outside partner that had the funding and you worked with a local nonprofit, or?
Yes,
So
it's a local nonprofit. And they usually apply for the NAP every year, and they use that program in the high schools. So we just partner with them to help place interns, and they even help us with outside projects that we do for our marketing, taking pictures and videos of our programs and things like that.
Okay.
I think that's a great example of like some of the flexibility in NAP. That program can be used in ways that are really outside the scope of like Missouri Works and the business type projects that typically a lot of project managers work on and work with. As long as it's, again, hitting the right populations, then like you can do really cool stuff like that. Thank you for sharing that, Amber.
This is Richard here in the Southeast. We work and quite another, but we spend a lot of time referring.
I think we're losing you, Richard.
I'm losing you, Richard.
Other call broad down here in Southeast, but we have a good partnership with our two reps here in the Southeast region. Leave it at that.
Well, your close was good, Richard. We did hear it.
Didn't hear the first part, but that was good. Thank you.
So I have a question for the group. Like I'm in Central Region, Missouri, and I wish I had the map up. I know that so much, she was just on the one like Osage County, for example, has been by there, but I haven't worked with a lot of the offices in Central, and that's a failing on my, I feel like a failing on my part. Like, how many of you on the call are here in like what we consider like Central Missouri or think you are?
And that goes from Central Region all the way really kind of west toward Kansas City there as well, below it, right?
I can share do you want to see the map of the DED regions, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Because they are different from extensions.
Yeah, that's
Let's see if I
that's
can.
part of it too. Is of course we can't. None of us can have the same maps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's never a perfect delineation of regions, but just knowing who that contact is, I think that's key.
Yeah, because I know that it was some time back we had like a couple joint meetings, or I had a couple joint meetings with some of the specialists, some of you guys in the Central region, but that was about 2 years ago, and I mean, we haven't changed that much, but we've definitely expanded people, and that's 17 counties. I think that's, this is a good, I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's a good opportunity to like re-engage with one another again. I won't, hopefully on the next meeting, have to give a presentation about the programs again, because some of that stuff makes me want to fall asleep, but at least just getting introductions and discussing things with, again, just reconnecting and engaging with one another would really help us engage with our partners and others that we work with that we may not cross lanes with because of just the differences and sometimes the audiences we all work with. Yeah, so this is that last slide, and that's, yeah, so Hannah's sharing that. Yeah, so you can see Central, I mean, we go up past like Columbia, down the lake area, far out as like Sullivan area, and then out as far as like Nevada, and those are communities. So like, that's where myself is at, and Michelle, we cover. Then of course you can see we have Kansas City, St. Louis, and up north, the Southwest and Southeast areas. And on our website, we do have like a contact map, and I should have probably put that on here. And it wasn't, I don't know what I was thinking. But like it has contact information on all.
That in the chat, so.
Okay, somebody is, yeah, so good, thank you. And so, that's one of those things. I mean, feel free to reach out and re-engage. I think myself, after this call, I need to look at the map and maybe reach out to you guys. And we do have, like everyone, semi-regular meetings with the regional engagement team. And I think I'm going to bring this meeting up to them and discuss this with Mark Stombaugh, who's the division director, and see if he'd be interested with, and I'm sure he would be interested in maybe having like a joint Zoom meeting or something with everybody. We can all jump in and sort of discuss. He can sort of speak to our division in more detail, and then you guys, whoever there in leadership or whoever in your unit there would like to discuss and sort of like reconvene. That may be something, a good approach, just to reconnect, because we don't work that often together, I think.
Yeah, and I know we're getting close to our time here. I want to thank you, Jonathan, so much for sharing information, and to just reiterate what you said. I mean, you're connecting with us, understanding what we do. What does Extension do, and how, when I came here to Extension, I looked at, wow, we've got people all around the state who are tightly into communities and understand what's happening in the communities. You have a handful of people there, at DED. So there seems like a lot of room for collaboration, but the important thing is relationships. In economic development, there's really two things. There's the project, right? The project, which gets a lot of attention. And when those things happen really fast, whether it's expansion or attraction, you have to have those relationships already, because you don't have time to build one from scratch. And so just building that relationship of trust and hey, we're going to be able to work together is one thing. But then the other side, and you really covered it well, was that there's so many other programs that DED does and that the general public doesn't know about, the NAPs and the CDBGs and stuff, that really do take a longer term relationship of understanding what those capabilities are. And I think sharing information back and forth that we can, I love the idea of having a joint meeting where we can just talk about, what we do, but more importantly, just see faces and put faces to this. And remember that there's the whole state's covered. We got the whole state
Yeah.
covered in our regions. They may not be exactly the same boundaries, but we just need to know the people and keep talking. And I really appreciate everyone being here today, and you, Jonathan, giving us the lowdown on what's happening at DED. So thank you again.
Yeah. It's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll share out Jonathan's presentation, his slides, and send a recording of this as well, in case you didn't catch all of it. So thank you again, Jonathan, and we'll see everyone later.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Hope the trees stay off your roof.
Yeah, I think we're good. I haven't heard the chainsaw. Fingers crossed.
All right.
Great.
Bye.
Take care.